Many of Macy's department store employees were first-generation immigrants. Proud of their new American heritage, they wanted to celebrate the American holiday of Thanksgiving with the type of festival their parents had loved in Europe.
Oh, Angelia, look, here comes Sonic.
In 1924, the annual Thanksgiving parade, started by Louis Bamberger in Newark, New Jersey, at the Bamberger store, was transferred to New York City by Macy's. In New York, the employees marched to Macy's flagship store on 34th Street dressed in vibrant costumes.
The Palmerades were a series of raids in late 1919 and early 1920 by the United States Department of Justice intended to capture, arrest, and deport radical leftists, especially anarchists, from the United States.
Hey, Socko Confetti, you're on your own!
See the world? Sure, do you trust me?
Sacco and Vanzetti were Italian-born anarchists who were convicted of murdering a guard and a paymaster during the armed robbery of a shoe factory in Braintree, Massachusetts, United States, in 1920, and were executed. Both adhered to a version of anarchism that advocated relentless warfare against war, violence, and oppression.
This time period was the most active for toaster innovation and design. Unfortunately, the Great Depression eliminated many of the smaller manufacturers. Toasters are identified pitcher, swinger, flopper, dropper, tipper, and pop-up. The design that eventually won out and became the most common was the pop-up. The first automatic pop-up toaster sold for home use was made in 1926. The Toastmaster 1A1, but it was expensive luxury for most people, and manual toasters continued to be manufactured and sold in the U.S. well into the 1950s.
In 1920, millions of American women exercised their right to vote for the first time. It took activists and reformers nearly 100 years to win that right, and the campaign was not easy. Disagreements over strategy threatened to cripple the movement more than once. But on August 26, 1920, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution was finally ratified, enfranchising all American women and declaring for the first time that they, like men, deserve all the rights and responsibilities of citizenship.
Yeah.
Oh my god, glad we get to vote! Oh my god, finally, I'm a woman! Rights. Oh my god! So great! Town hall!
Yeah.
I'm so glad we get to vote!
Mr. Gatsby, I'd like to know.
Exactly who are you, anyhow? Can't you see who this guy is? With his house, his parties, and his fancy clothes. We were born different from you.
It's in our blood. Nothing that you do or dream up can ever change that.
Gatsby. He had a grand vision for his life since he was a boy.
I'm gonna fix things just the way they were before.
Just you and me. No amount of fire could challenge the fairy tale he had stored up in his heart.
Will you still love me when I'm no longer young?
The Red Scare is the promotion of fear of a potential rise of communism or radical leftism used by anti-leftist proponents. In the United States, the first Red Scare was about worker socialist revolution and political radicalism. The second Red Scare was focused on the national and foreign communist influence in society, infiltrating the federal government or both. The first Red Scare began following the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 and the intensely patriotic years of World War I as anarchist and left-wing social agitation aggravated national, social, and political tensions. Political scientist and former member of the Communist Party, Murray B. Levin, wide anti-radical hysteria provoked by a mounting fear and anxiety that a Bolshevik revolution in America was imminent, a revolution that would change church, home, marriage, civility, and the American way of life. The second Red Scare occurred after World War II, and it was popularly known as McCarthyism, after its most famous supporter, Senator Joseph McCarthy. McCarthyism coincided with increased popular fear of communist espionage consequent to a Soviet Eastern Europe, the Berlin blockade, the Chinese Civil War, the confessions of spying for the Soviet Union given by several high-ranking U.S. government officials in the Korean War.
Vladimir Lenin, the architect of the Bolshevik Revolution and the first leader of the Soviet Union, dies of a brain hemorrhage at age 54. In the early 1890s, Lenin abandoned his law career to devote himself to Marxist study and the provocation of revolutionary activity among Russian workers. Arrested and exiled to Siberia in 1897, he later traveled to Western Europe, where in 1903 he established the Bolshevik faction of the Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party. The Bolsheviks were a militant party of professional revolutionaries who sought to overthrow the Tsarist government and set up a Marxist government in its place. In 1905, workers rebelled across Russia, but it was not until 1917 and Russia's disastrous involvement in World War I that Lenin realized that the opportunity for communist revolution had come. In March 1917, the Russian army garrisoned in Petrograd defected to the Bolshevik cause, and Tsar Nicholas II was forced to abdicate. Lenin immediately left Switzerland and crossed German enemy lines to arrive at Petrograd on April 16, 1917. 6 months later, under his leadership, the Bolsheviks seized power in Russia, and Lenin became virtual dictator of the country. However, civil war and foreign intervention delayed complete Bolshevik control of Russia until 1920. Lenin's government nationalized industry and distributed land, Lenin's government nationalized industry and distributed land, and on December 30th, 1922, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was established. Upon Lenin's death in early 1924, his body was embalmed and placed in a mausoleum near the Moscow Kremlin. Petrograd was renamed Leningrad in his honor. Fellow revolutionary Joseph Stalin succeeded him as the leader of the Soviet Union.
Civil Liberties Union is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization whose stated mission is to defend and preserve the individual rights and liberties guaranteed to every person in the country by the Constitution and laws of the United States. It works through litigation, lobbying, and community empowerment. Founded in 1920 by Roger Baldwin, Crystal Eastman, and Walter Nichols. When the ACLU was founded in 1920, its focus was on freedom of speech, primarily for anti-war protesters. During the 1920s, the ACLU expanded its scope to include protecting the free speech rights of artists and striking workers, and working with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People to combat racism and discrimination.
Dancing was a very important part of culture in the 1920s. Come to a dance concert.
Prohibition! This sounds ready. Prohibition in the United States was a nationwide constitutional ban on the sale, production, importation, and transportation of alcoholic beverages that remained in place from 1920 to 1933. It was promoted by the Dry Crusaders, a movement led by rural protesters and social progressives in the Democratic and Republican parties, and was coordinated by the Anti-Saloon League and the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Prohibition was mandated under the 18th Amendment to the United States Constitution, enabling legalization known as the Volestation Act, set down the rules for enforcing the ban, and defined the types of alcoholic beverages that were prohibited. For example, religious uses of wine were allowed. Private ownership and consumption of alcohol was not made illegal under federal law. However, in many areas, local laws were more strict, with some states banning possession outright. Nationwide prohibition ended with the ratification of the 21st Amendment, which repealed the 18th Amendment on December 5th, 1933.
Okay, go.
I'm getting so drunk. I'm so glad they invented alcohol and they didn't ban it.
Wait, do it again. Do it again. Ready?
I'm so glad they
Stop
invented
touching me.
alcohol.
Stop, do it again. No, her head's not cut off. Do it again.
Alcohol is so good. I'm glad they didn't ban it. It's so great.
Oh, $1,000. So easy to spend. Such a good market.
A stock market crash is a sudden dramatic decline of stock prices across a significant cross-section of a stock market, resulting in a significant loss of paper wealth. Crashes are driven by panic as much as by underlying economic factors. They often follow speculative stock market bubbles. The economy had been growing fluidly for most of the Roaring Twenties. It was a technological golden age as innovations such as the radio, automobile, aviation, telephone, and the power grid were deployed and adopted. Companies that had pioneered these advances, like Radio Corporation of America and General Motors, saw their stocks soar. Financial corporations also did well, as Wall Street bankers floated mutual fund companies, then known as investment trusts, like the Goldman Sachs Trading Corporation. Investors were infatuated with the returns available in the stock market, especially with the use of leverage coming through margin debit. On August 24, 1921, the Dow Jones Industrial Age stood at a value of 63.9. By September 3, 1929, it had risen more than sixfold, touching 381.2. It would not regain this level for another 25 years. By the summer of 1929, it was clear that the economy was contracting and the stock market went through a series of unsettling price declines. These declines fed investor anxiety, and events soon came to head on October 24th, 28th, and 29th, known respectively as Black Thursday, Black Monday, and Black Tuesday.
Hoovervilles. During the Great Depression, which began in 1929 and lasted approximately a decade, shantytowns appeared across the U.S. as unemployed people who were evicted from their homes. As the Depression worsened in the 1930s, causing severe hardships for millions of Americans, many looked to the federal government for assistance. When the government failed to provide relief, President Herbert Hoover was blamed for the intolerable economic and social conditions in shantytowns that cropped up across the nation, primarily on the outskirts of major cities, became known as Hoovervilles. Let's go.
So cool. Oh, it's so cool. It looks so cool. I'm disappointed. Just some change.
Black blizzards.
This massive dust storm created sand drifts as high as 6 feet in areas of the country, burying roads and vehicles. As the worst drought in American history continues to turn over farm soil into dust, more of these devastating storms can be expected.
The United States presidential election of 1932 was the 37th presidential election held on Tuesday, November 8, 1932. The election took place among the backdrop of the Great Depression that had ruined the promises of incumbent president and Republican. Of incumbent president and Republican candidate Herbert Hoover to bring about a new era of prosperity. The Democratic nomination went to the well-known governor of the most populous state, New York, Franklin D. Roosevelt, who had been elected governor in a landslide in 1930. Roosevelt united all wings of his party, avoided decisive cultural issues, and brought in a leading Southern conservative as his running mate. House Speaker John Nance Garner of Texas. Civilian Conservation Corps.
The Civilian Conservation Corps was a public work relief program that operated from 1933 to 1942 in the United States for unemployed, unmarried men from relief families as part of the New Deal. Originally for young men 18 to 23, was eventually expanded to young men ages 17 to 28.
National Youth Administration. National Youth Administration was a New Deal agency in the United States that focused on providing work and education for Americans between the age of 16 and 25. It operated from June 26, 1935 to 19... Fair Labor Standards Act.
The FLSA establishes minimum wage, overtime pay, record-keeping, and youth employment standards affecting employees in the private sector and in federal, state, and local governments. Covered non-exempt workers are entitled to a minimum wage of not less than $7.25 per hour effective July 4th, 2009. What the fuck? This is...
FDIC.
Oh man, I'm trying to deposit this $1 million into my bank account, but I can't because of the FDIC. I'm only insured $250,000. Ah!